Thank you very much, Vito. Yeah, I think thanks, Kawasoe-san, for the inspiring presentation. And as Vito said, and that's a great segue into my presentation, we're going to see what the current status of optical technologies and our assumptions are, and how they affect basically our future. So let me click here. OK, good. I'm going to explain basically what the forum is about, the structure, how we work, ways of working, and the properties that the forum has. So for prospective members and potential members, you understand basically what we would be joining. I think it will give you also context into the panel and the keynote speech. So without further ado, this is what we have been using as our North Star since the beginning. And as you see, Kawasoe-san showed this several times, which is basically the properties that an optical network provides you, which is low power consumption, high transmission capacity, and low delay. And if you can see there, we are building the communication network infrastructure for the future. That was from 6 years ago. Today I was discussing when the forum was founded, and it was exactly 6 years ago. Last year we were going through the 5th year anniversary, and this was basically what we set out to do, to build that infrastructure. As basically Vito was saying, we couldn't imagine the change that AI basically meant. All our projections on data, how important would be to have these type of links, they have been blown away. So now with AI, it means that the importance of the forum is even more, and it stresses that we were betting on the right horse. This is exactly what we need to basically take the networks into the future. So with that, we had worked 5 years and a half. And since these changes in the environment, we needed to agree on how to move forward the forum. So a couple of months ago in Kyoto, the board of directors of the IOWN Global Forum met and decided how can the forum continue to create value in this new environment. And what you can see there, down there on the slide, is what we agreed on as basically value proposition for the immediate future. And as you can see there, well, you can read it, but I'm going to focus on a few words there. So the first one is that we have a broad ecosystem of thought leaders. Thought leaders, Kawasoe-san mentioned several times, Vito as well. So we are basically getting thought leaders from the ecosystem, and I have another slide on that later. So we will be discussing that. Another interesting thing from how we are intending to create value is the fact that we are connecting photonics breakthroughs, so breakthroughs in technology, with deployment models, integration practices. This means that we connect technology with the market, right? So we are not just a forum about technology. We want to reach eventually deployments, which is our end goal. This is important because the way we connect the market with the technologies is through use cases. And I will be presenting some use cases later, at least a set of them, not all of them, obviously. But when we have a use case, it clearly targeted a market, a specific market. And I will explain later in the ways of working how we do that and how we connect these breakthroughs in technology with these specific market segments so that we can create value in this particular market segment, not just beyond going in general, beyond the properties that I was discussing before. And also I want to focus on the deployment models, integration practices, blueprints. So the IOWN Global Forum is not an SDO. We don't develop standards. The standards or technologies used in our blueprints, they are typically standardized in SDOs. Sometimes we use de facto standards as well. And it's basically the industry-recognized centers of competence. Venues like IETF, like ITUT, like IEEE, they develop the standards. We put them together in a blueprint to integrate something into a deployment. This is important because then I will be also talking in general on how the IOWN Global Forum fits in the ecosystem, so just keep in mind, we are not an SDO, we are developing blueprints, integration practices, and deployment models. Very important. Moving ahead, as I said, a bunch of thought leaders coming together into a forum. We are growing really rapidly. If you notice, Kawasoe-san was having data from a couple of weeks ago. 176 members. Now we are 180 members. So this is growing all the time. It's really, really great to see more members coming. And the futures session actually is a way to also bring new members to see, if you are interested, and if you are, please join us and help us push in this effort. It's important to see that we have a very diverse membership, and it's in 3 dimensions at least. I want to talk about 3 dimensions. The first one is the global reach. So geography. We have, obviously, and this is a question we always get, the forum is really strong in Japan and in Asia Pacific, but we have also, many members from Europe and many members from North America. That gives us access to different geographical markets, because you need to understand that different geographies, they have very different markets, and the assumptions that we are making are completely different as well. So it's really key to have members in all these geographies. We have cross-industry perspectives. So for the use cases, we cannot just have people that understand the optical technologies, they build a network, they deploy networks, or they operate a network. In addition to that, we need also what we used to call user companies, which are companies that they are specific that they are bringing use cases. So it could be a car manufacturer, for example. It could be a crane operator, a mine operator, many of them. So if you see across the industry, we have operators again. Financial services, entertainment, so all these market segments that we are basically interested in. And then the value chain, of course, we actually have from academic, so we have academic members, not doing full research, but usually do applied research, going into basically equipment vendors, infrastructure operators, et cetera, integrators, all that. It's actually interesting because this is what, now I will be talking about the ways of working. It makes it possible, because the ways of working is what makes the forum very special, in my opinion. This is just, you will see some well-known logos there. This is the list of our members. And then before I go into the ways of working, just keep in mind that Kawasoe has been talking about APN, All Photonics Network, and we usually are well known by that technology, right? That blueprint. But the forum works also on ancillary technologies that complement the APN to build certain types of use cases. Some technologies are specific to a use case, some of them are more horizontal, and they apply to many of them. So just, you may hear about DCI, digital twins, for example. So all that is also coming from the digital forum, from the IOWN Global Forum, in order to support the use cases we have, which are all based on the APN, the IOWN Global Forum All Photonics Network. So that's a clarification because we get a lot of questions about that. Ways of working. As I said, ways of working is actually a key, and if you are thinking of becoming a member, I think this is extremely interesting, because this is where the rubber hits the road, how we are developing our blueprints. So the way we do it is, as I said before, we have use cases. So the use cases, they help us identify requirements on the technology. You want to do something, you define a use case, and then that basically ends up being a set of requirements. The requirements, they are translated into blueprints, so that we understand how to build the system, again, how to put together, integrate it, and have something that will be able to basically realize the use case. And then we validate our assumptions. And the way we validate our assumptions is in 3 ways. First of all is proof of concept. So we make sure that technology works. Until we understand that the technology works, this is an iterative process. We will go back to use cases, define requirements, redefine or refine our thinking in terms of how to put together a technology until we have something that is doing what we want to do, technology-wise. But then what makes this forum special is that we don't stop there, but we also do proof of value and proof of business. Proof of value means that the value that we are trying to create for the stakeholders of the use case, it's actually created. So it's not just a technology. No, we are not deploying or developing technologies, blueprints, use cases for the sake of them. We are just trying to create this value. And this is the proof of value. And then the proof of business is to make sure that we are producing that value at the right price point. So it's economically viable. If we are producing some value that is way too expensive, deployments are not going to move there. We need to provide the market with incentives so that these things are deployed. So again, at the end of the day, when we finish that, we finish the 3 validations. The end result, as I said before, is deployments at scale. And this is what we are trying to do eventually with all our use cases. In terms of, we get this question from the press a lot. What have you guys been doing in the last 5, 6 years? So this is just some numbers so that you can see, we've been working on 8 use cases, technical outlooks, functional architectures, etc. So you see, we haven't been idle. There's a lot of stuff produced, and you can find it on the web page, actually. So again, we are trying to go to 2030 and beyond, of course, but we have now the new North Star, as I described before. And then coming back to the ways of working and how we are developing use cases, again, we start with use cases, requirements, then reference implementation models, and then the proof of concept, value, and business. We divide our use cases in early adoption and future looking. Early adoption means that we have identified a set of use cases that they can be early in the market, so we can use them early to be, basically following the life cycle. And then we have future looking to go more into inspirational use cases, things that we could, play around with the technology and do something that is maybe, more deployable in the future, but maybe not right now. So I just wanted to give you a taste of the use cases, not all of them again, because, for example, they're going to discuss them in the keynote and in the panel, but at least you understand, what type of services and use cases we are talking about, and I think, giving examples is good. So if you go to the early adoption use cases, you see there financial services. We're going to be talking about them later. Broadcast media, that's broadcast media production, AI implementation, and construction. All the use cases at the end of the day, as I explained before, they use the APN. So the idea is how to use the network in order to implement the use case. And again, why do we need to do that? The reason why we need to do that is that just applying blindly the technology, an APN, to a use case, you will get some benefits, but maybe not all of it. By actually working on an actual use case, you can reap all the benefits that they are there. And as you can imagine, having a fast network like an APN, at the end of the day, everything is about disaggregation. You are disaggregating, 2 functions that they used to be together. You are basically disaggregating them, and that leads to all type of interesting properties. Sometimes you get centralized approaches. Sometimes you get, distributed approaches. Sometimes you get properties that you don't even expect. And to give you an example, for example, the way we approach this, to work on the financial services use case, we organized a roundtable in London, London being in Europe a center for banks, of course, and financial services institutions. We went there, we explained the use case we were talking about, which is connecting data centers, basically, for financial institutions, and we validated our assumptions. Some of them were validated, some of them were invalidated, because they said, no, look, this is not a pain point for us, so if you solve it, it doesn't create any value. But more importantly, we understood why this could be important. And interestingly enough, it was more about how far you can have data centers, so you have access to renewable energy, less expensive areas, so you can go into a rural area and have a cheaper data center, for example, rather than the speed in itself. So really interesting. I'm not going to dwell into that a lot because, again, they're going to be discussing later. But for financial services, it's really important when they have a synchronous replication for bank data, core bank data, transactions. If you're a bank, you cannot lose transactions. So the requirements were very tough, and we are happy to see that we could produce actual value when we met with the stakeholders that they would be eventually deploying this or using this in this case. Broadcast media is when you have, for example, an event, and you are taking video footage with many cameras and all that. So again, this is about disaggregating. So usually you have the production close to the stadium, typically these tracks that you will see outside events like football matches and things like that. So what we are able to do is disaggregate that. The end result is like all the production can basically be centralized, performed in a central area. So that actually gives a lot of flexibility to the media producer in this case to do the production for many events happening at the same time, for example. So again, we are talking about some use cases that they are about decentralizing, others that they are centralizing some functionality. So it's quite interesting. AI implementation is if you have a farm of GPUs and you are using them as a service. So you have a and again, it's all data compute, so we are disaggregating, again, two functions that suddenly they can be put, split apart, and then you can actually send not all the data so that you have the data and the compute and you train an AI model, you can actually send data as needed, which, it has better privacy properties, confidentiality properties, sovereignty, etc. So it solves a lot of problems that they are not obvious when you think about that just from the network perspective. And finally, the construction use case, which is basically about remote construction. You have environments that they are dangerous for humans. You want to get humans away. So again, it's a disaggregating the control of an excavator, for example. You have the human far off in a safe place, controlling that. We can also map a mine, for example, if you have a mine or a construction site, and send all the data so that you have a virtual representation. This is a lot of data if you want to have it in high fidelity. And then they can do all type of planning remotely again, but not on site. So extremely interesting. Fiber sensing plays a role there as well, so that you understand what's going on in the construction site. And to conclude, the future-looking use cases, I will not go into them because I'm running out of time. But we are looking into cyber physical systems, digital twins, metaverse, and AI, not surprising, and some approaches for improving industry management. So with that, just to conclude my presentation, this gives you an idea of why the forum was formed and what was our initial North Star, how we have shifted in 5 years down the road, just because we were actually becoming more relevant than we thought it was possible because of the AI and all the properties that it has with higher requirements, and how with that now we are having our ways of working as a competitive advantage basically, and be able to get to final deployments, which is again our final goal. We are not a technology company forum only. We actually go for the market as well. And with that, thank you very much. And Vito, over to you. Thank you. Thank you.